to the show with no name. Are we live yet, Theonie?
We are. And I feel the need to say something we haven't said in a little while. So you're Adair Palmer. You're the blonde one.
And she is Theonie Roussianos, wherever and you know how long it took me to learn to pronounce your name. And I'm losing my voice. Oh, my God, already, so soon. Today we have got, I'll just introduce the show with no name. It was dreamed up by Theonie and myself to help people in your local community to raise their profile and encourage awareness and support for what matters most to you and your communities. We help not-for-profits, charities and service clubs to connect with communities to raise brand awareness and help staff and volunteers working within them to become the best brand champion that they can for their cause. Theonie, who have we got today?
Today, I'm excited today. When I read up on Nikala Sim and I stalked it. No, it's not stalking. What's it called? It's called doing professional research on LinkedIn. Research. That's right.
Hashtag professional research.
I was a little bit, I was mildly intimidated, but that's okay. She's not intimidating. That's not what I'm trying to say. So Nikala is a former Fairfax Media journalist, and she's the former acting advertising art director for Cosmopolitan Magazine. And she's a business owner at the Refugee Roundtable, which is what she's here to talk about with us today. So the mission of the Refugee Roundtable is to create a community of refugees, asylum seekers and their advocates with the intent to empower and provide opportunity. Now, I won't go through all the ins and outs of Refugee Roundtable. I think there's nobody better to explain to us what it's all about than Nikala, but she is here to share with us a specific aspect of what she's working on there to help asylum seekers. And I'm just going to bring Nikala up. I couldn't introduce it better than she can herself. I can hear myself Adair in your screen.
Yeah, I know. I've just, that's all right. It's all good now. I fixed it.
Welcome, Nikala. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you giving us your time.
Hello,
thank you. Thanks to you both. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak and share what the Refugee Roundtable is about. So thanks to you.
We're absolutely excited to learn about it and that people are actually taking action and doing some amazing things in the community. What I'd like to do is invite people who are watching just to let us know who you are, where you're from, what your interest is in this topic, and also if you know that there are other people who would have an interest in this topic as well, please feel free to invite them along to join us, because the more the merrier, and we're all up for a party regardless of the topic. So there we go. Theonie's on the ball. So thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Now, yes, no, I was trying not to do the Greek thing and talk over. So usually, so I thought I'll just wait.
That'll be a first.
I don't think that's a Greek thing, unless I'm Greek as well, in which case, welcome, sister.
Greek by default.
Now, I'm interested in your story. Share with everybody how you came about. Your passion for helping the refugees and asylum seekers came from somewhere. You saw some things out in the field. Share with us a little bit about the why.
So, like all of us who are interested in the news and politics, of course, I'd seen news stories about Manus Island, not so much about Nauru. And I mean, of course, particularly I remember the riots of 2014 and the death of Reza Barati. And I am a big heart. I love community. I love helping people. That's what drives me and what makes me feel whole. And at the end of 2016, Christmas of 2016, I think it was, a friend of mine said to me, "Oh, look, I found this Facebook group that I think you'd be really, really interested in." And it was the Manus Island Cricket League, and it was the refugees on Manus Island having a cricket tournament with the intent to show their humanity to the world. So to show a different side of what we think about when we think about these words, refugee or asylum seeker. And I made friends, and I made the decision to go over to Manus Island naively, I admit, It was very naive. I realised when I look back then, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. But whilst it was I was deported by the Australian government because I'm a journalist and they didn't want me there. And I was there on a tourist visa. I hadn't applied for a journalist visa because I was actually there as a tourist. And to cut a long story short, as a result of that experience, I saw something that I had never seen before and I thought I would never see. And the first thing I saw was the might of the Australian government. And that completely shocked me and opened my eyes. But the other thing I saw was human rights abuse, basically. And once I paired those two things together, I thought to myself, I can't look away, I can't do anything else. And over the course of the last couple of years, I've moved closer and closer to where I am today, which is having started my own business to try to empower refugees and asylum seekers through the creation of a community that pairs people who've fled persecution, who are in need but want to really go forth with their lives, with people who obviously want to provide that support.
So what kind of support are you looking for from the community for the Roundtable and the projects? Now, I'm interested specifically in the project that we were talking about with, now I've forgotten her name, forgive me, there's a woman that
I won't mention her name. One of the most important things, I think, is that we maintain people's privacy, not just because we're talking about people who fled persecution. So some people have actually fled to save their own lives. So it's important to keep them safe. But apart from anything else, people have, the people that I deal with predominantly come from our offshore processing in Papua New Guinea and Nauru. And those communities are very small communities of refugees and asylum seekers where everybody knows everybody. And the last thing we want to do is share something within that community that might cause somebody to feel shame. And I've seen that in a lot of instances. So I'll tell people what you're referring to, though. So one of the things I've done in the last couple of years is I began to volunteer as advocate liaison for Doctors for Refugees. And in that role, people in offshore processing would contact me and I would get their consent, and then I would get their medical information and I would pass that on to doctors to try and advocate for them to receive better medical care. And of course, now we've seen the Medevac Amendment, which means that there's now a formal process within the law to allow people to seek to get further help where they need it. And one of the families that I assisted whilst I was working for Doctors for Refugees was one of the many families on Nauru where the children developed resignation syndrome. And that is a condition that comes about as a result of indefinite detention, so prolonged detention. So we're talking children, and in this instance, it was a 16-year-old child who'd arrived on Nauru at the age of 11. So I had spent his whole 5 years living in a tent with no air conditioning, no privacy, and he finally succumbed to resignation syndrome and ceased to eat or drink, and he was in imminent danger of internal organ failure. And so his family, gratefully, were brought to Australia and he received medical care. He's now doing really well, and he's a real soccer fan. So he's a really gorgeous boy. He had his 17th birthday upon arrival in Australia. But I'm assisting one of his older siblings to attend education, because the policy of the government, when people are brought from offshore, they are able to, the minister gives consent for them to live within the community, and we call this community detention. Now, this is not a visa. They have no work rights or study rights. Quite simply, they are provided a home to live in, and they live. They continue with their medical care and they engage with that. They're allowed access to English classes. But this one young woman, she's turned 21 upon arrival in Australia as well. And so her access to tertiary education didn't exist, so I advocated for her, and immigration gave permission for her to attend TAFE upon the proviso that I took the financial responsibility for that. So very kindly, an amazing man called Roger Greeley saw a Facebook post of mine and talked to all his friends, and about $830 has been raised towards $1,300 worth of first semester fees. So my big request today is actually for people to contact me via Facebook if you'd like to donate. I mean, it can be as small as, you know, $10. I really don't care, because every little bit's going to count. And, you know, I mean, we know that youth engagement is really, really important for mental health and for people's futures. So this young lady wants to be a nurse, so you might be funding one of our future nurses, which would be great.
And that's a beautiful story, and there's so many more that could use our help. And I'm guessing that they don't get any support from the government to attend courses and do this sort of thing. So we do have to raise all the funds for them to attend. Is that correct?
Well, to my knowledge, this is only the second person over 18 who's actually been given permission to study. Or the children, the government pays for children to attend school, actually provides their first uniform and yeah, gets them into education, which is great. But it's the children who have turned 18 who are in those very early years who are treated as adults and have the no work, no study rights. So, yeah. So you're right, no support there.
And then when they are, so they're allowed to study, but then they're still not allowed to seek employment once they've finished their course as things stand currently, right?
That's correct. So that's if they're in community detention. Of course, community detention doesn't last forever. It's usually for the period of time whilst people need that medical support. So once the family members are considered to be well enough that they can support themselves within the community, then they'll be given a visa, at which point in time they then have no home and no income, but they have the right to work and study. So, yeah, but who knows? Maybe we'll see that change in the future and it'll become a more supportive system.
Well, with people as passionate as you, if there's going to be a change come along, it's going to be, it takes people to make a difference, and it takes people to stamp their feet and make noise and show that they care before, you know, the powers that be can see that it is an issue and they need to do something about it. And pre-election is usually the time to do it.
Thank you both very much. And, you know, there's the thing about this is that, you know, this is a multi-billion-dollar policy. And it's been going on for 6 years. We've had 12 deaths. And you would imagine a policy. So I don't know how many people you know here in Australia who you've had to advocate for really, really strongly to get an ear infection treated. But this is what we're talking about for our people who are offshore. And it ranges from something like an ear infection that's moved into the skull to having had a broken bone for 3 months, or a lot of acute conditions that have become chronic. And the incredible thing about it is there's actually hundreds, if not thousands, of Australians who support people offshore in Papua New Guinea and in Nauru, and who spend many, many, many hours, like myself, trying to assist people quite simply with sometimes financial assistance, to have phone credit to be able to maintain contact with their families. Sometimes it's just quite simply friendship support. There's been a lot of art initiatives. And so there's this incredible community of people across Australia who do really, really amazing things. And a lot of people have actually become organised. And there's a group of ladies who I'm sure you both would love called Mums for Refugees, who are across Australia. And yeah, they're really, really cool. And they have, when people come here to Australia, they assist them to get warm clothes and groceries, and find out about the community in which they've been put. And They've started a new food initiative now to assist people. So there really is a lot of people like myself. There really are a lot of people like myself who are doing really, really amazing things. So we've got to be grateful for that.
And these are
go on. Oh, really? Paper, scissors, rocks.
I'll get mine out quickly. So these are basic things that we take for granted, that we just think we just have a right to, fresh water, fresh food, clothes on your back, employment, all that kind of stuff that we just take for granted, that these people basically don't have a right to.
Absolutely, but it's actually not that simple, because people in community detention are provided with a home, so they don't have to worry about that. They are provided with income to be able to buy food and, phone credits, cigarettes, whatever you want to do with your money to live your life. It's not a lot, though. We're talking about $250 a fortnight, so it's certainly not living it up. But the thing that everybody has who is an asylum seeker or a refugee in this system, or that everybody doesn't have, I should say, that we have and we take for granted and we don't consider, is autonomy, is the right to choose what we do for ourselves. And so that's as simple as in community detention, you have a curfew. If you live in Papua New Guinea or Manus Island, if you're in one of the 3 accommodations there, you have a curfew. There's so much about it that's disempowering, and that disempowerment over a prolonged period of time is what I think has the greatest impact or the worst impact for people. You can live without a jacket, you can go hungry for a day, but to constantly for 6 years, and we're talking 6 years, not be able to make your own decisions, and especially in a frustrating situation where, say, your child is really, really sick, and if you had the choice for yourself, if your doctor wasn't helping you, you'd go and see another doctor. Well, people don't have that choice. And so it's about coming up against this brick wall all the time of trying to advocate yourself and being unable to, because the system that you're within does not allow it.
Yeah. So Jacqueline Karen, I'm not sure if you saw the comment that I just put up, Nikala. Jacqueline says she's asking how she can help. She's happy to donate a couple of dollars for the young lady to study. What else can she do? Thank you, Jackie. So I have linked the post above. I have linked Nikala's personal profile and also the Refugee Roundtable. So you can click on those and go to contact Nikala directly so that she can give you details of how you can make a contribution and spread the word. As Adair has just commented, you're multitasking. I like it. So spread the word. Get this interview in front of people who you think need to see it. People, everybody's got a heart. Everybody likes to feel like they're making some sort of contribution, and a project like this, you are helping real people who need the help and the support.
And what I was going to say before was there are, I know, agencies, when you talked about mums in Australia or Mums for Refugees, a community, I'd love to be tapped into that. We actually went through the system several years ago to see if we could volunteer as a family with refugees. It seems to have fallen off the radar now, and this may be just my perspective because I don't watch the news anymore, but it could be, it doesn't seem to have it's like people just, it's like the hidden thing that nobody speaks about.
I think actually that's a misconception. That's a huge misconception. There's lots of media, and actually my personal page, my Nikala Sim page, I started in July of 2017 to try and put all the media in one place. And so I've watched the media into every day since then, and I see the spread of news stories. And of course, sometimes there's more and sometimes there's less. And it's part of it is, responsive to, say, if somebody's died or if there's been a policy change or something dramatic has happened. But I think one of the things is and that our largest media outlets in Australia are owned by one man, and his name is Rupert Murdoch.
Mm-hmm.
And Murdoch Press is not, on the whole, supportive of refugees, asylum seekers, or immigration from multicultural countries. And that's my own personal opinion and what I get from the media I see. Occasionally, you see something that's a bit of a surprise. So one of the things is our mainstream media isn't. It doesn't want to put a lot of the stories that are eye-opening in front of the community. You have media outlets like The Guardian, which is excellent, and they follow things very, very strongly. SBS, ABC are also very, very good too. There's a couple of Facebook pages. So there's one actually particularly called With Open Arms, and the lady who runs that is really, really good. And so it's like with everything, you know, there's only so much time, and we all have our sights focused at different things. And, you know, there's so much in this world that needs to be helped. But actually, interestingly, refugees is one of the election items, one of the things that the major parties are fighting about and bringing to the fore. So a lot of the information, I think, is a misconception out there. And predominantly what people forget is that an asylum seeker is somebody who's asked for asylum from their country. They're asking for refuge in our country. And the reasons, I mean, Australia is a signatory to a number of international conventions that support the rights of children, that support a non-discrimination and, you know, safety for people seeking refuge as well. And so anybody who says to you, I'm a refugee, has been through a really, really rigorous process of having their story picked apart moment by moment to determine whether it's true that they have fled persecution. So you can't be a refugee because you wanted to come to Australia and have a better life. Economics is not persecution. That's just a desire to have a better life. You know, you're a refugee if you've fled being in a place where your religion was persecuted, or your choice of the person you love in your life was persecuted, or maybe even in one instance, one of the stories on the Refugee Roundtable that I wrote about was quite simply because a man in Iran loved heavy metal music. So he came under fire from the authorities for the choice of music because they believed it was satanic. So therefore it goes against the Muslim tenets of that particular government. So I can't remember your original question. Really went on a bit of a rant there. But
that was the round table, going around the round table, perhaps.
And, you know, I guess the whole idea of the round table was so that we can all sit at it and we can all bring something to it and we can all be equal, you know.
Yeah, so there's no one at the head of the table. There's no one at the base. It's just everybody's equal, looking at each other.
And I just want to address the question before, if you wouldn't mind, just quickly about how can people help.
Well, that was what I was just going to say. I'm doing the great thing talking over you, Nikala.
Right.
I was going to say a couple of years ago, my husband and I, we wanted to get involved with the refugee community and we wanted to help. We were willing to give our time and, you know, to help people, whether it's navigating through society in Australia or whatever. It was our son, he's now 17. I think he was probably about 9 or 10 at the time. And we actually went to one of the more prominent, I can't remember the name, but it was one of the church-based organisations that helped with food and clothing and housing and that type of thing. And we all went down there and had this little interview and nothing ever came of it. And I'm just curious as to when we tried to go through the formal system, so this is related to the comment you were going to make, where we as a family, we really wanted our son to have an understanding of what, you know, and an empathy for people who are coming into our community and how we can help them have the privileged lives that we actually enjoy. And we weren't denied it, but the lack of enablement for us to actually actively engage was astounding. And this is a formalised volunteer program.
I think you might find that maybe the funding was stopped for that particular program, and so it never went forward, you know. And
it was just interesting that there was no communication. It was just like nothing, and we had nothing to go and say, well, where do we hook into this? And there was nothing, you know.
And that's a sad experience. And I think, you know, that happens to a lot of people when they're interested in lots of things. And I'm sorry that happened to you, because I mean, how wonderful to have you and your family, you know, empowering others. That's amazing. No, it's not too late.
It's never too late.
So I mentioned first that I was the advocate liaison officer for Doctors for Refugees, and I quit that role sort of probably 8 months into it, because I realised that locked me into one thing, and I'm a bit alternative. I like to do what I like to do, and so as a result of that, I then started to contact all the other major agencies across Australia and said, "Hi, I want to help. What can I do?" And so now I have, you know, really good relationships with the Human Rights Law Centre and the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, and also the Medical Evacuation Response Group that are dealing with that piece of legislation I mentioned before, and then numerous just organisations across Australia like Mums for Refugees and Gifts for Manus and Nauru, and I don't know. I mean, there's so many, and so really the place where I do all my work is Facebook, and Facebook is great. And so there's something called Advanced Search Beta. Have you used Advanced Search 2.2 Beta?
I haven't, but I'm interested.
I find out so much. So can I type it in this chat thing? Is that what I do, or is that for you? I'll just type it in.
You can put it there. We can put it in the links below. You probably haven't got them.
Advanced search. Oh, I can't type. Not very good for a journalist, is it? 2.2 beta.
As long as you can speak, it doesn't matter.
So you type this into your search bar of Facebook. Okay, and then you delete it and you type in the topic that you're interested in. So if you typed in refugees, then at the top it's going to give you a list, and it'll say posts, people, groups, pages, or whatever, and you can click on there and it will show you lists of all the Facebook groups, pages, people, posts in Australia or even across the world. You can isolate it further by time frame. You can isolate it by you or your friends or whatever. And so then you can, that's a really, really good way to find things near you. Another thing, as I say, is, you know, you can watch my Nikala Sim Facebook page, because I try to stay away from the political news and try to post the sort of news that you're talking about. So, you know, here's a community in Australia, here's their refugee group, this is what they've been doing. And I think that's if you really want to get involved, that's probably the better way of doing it. And then you start to find a little bit of a community. And that community will then say to you, okay, you know, here you go. Or if you join something like Mums for Refugees, you can write on their Facebook page and say, hey, I'm living in Warrnambool. Does anybody know where there's a refugee group nearby that I can help? Or, you know, if you've got a bit of, if you can donate financially, then you can donate to things like the National Justice Project or the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre or my little education fund. Or so there's ways to find it.
Speaking, we have run out of time, but I did want to go back to the education fund. So she's 21 years old, and there are obviously many more, but this is one that you're helping currently. So she's 21 years old now. When they're in Nauru or wherever, like you said, they do receive a nominal amount so that they can buy food, that kind of thing. But then once they're here, I'm assuming on what you said, so they lose that, so they're then also homeless.
No. So the conditions, I actually was discussing the conditions here in Australia rather than the conditions in Papua New Guinea or Nauru. So just to clarify it, Papua New Guinea is all single men. Nauru was where we sent our families, single women and single men. So they're quite and very different countries, very different in terms of the way that people have been treated and in terms of the way that the system is set up as well. So people are coming here to Australia for medical care. I think there's been 158 cases fought through the courts to get people medical care, and those people have been brought to Australia as a result of that. So they are either put within an immigration transit accommodation, so in Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne, even in Adelaide there's one actually. I think there might be an ITA in every state. Not really sure. That's something I have to learn. But if they're not put in a transit accommodation centre, then they're housed within the community. And when they're housed within the community, they have a home. They have money given to them every fortnight to provide the necessities of life. If you're an adult, you're unable to work, you're unable to study. If you're a child, you go to school. So I'm trying to assist the young people who are really still technically what I consider a child. I think if you're 19, 20, 21, you're still really young enough to be considered a child. And you certainly shouldn't be sitting at home twiddling your thumbs. It's a time when the brain's really elastic and needs to suck in knowledge. And it's the time when you can work towards a future. And that's what this is all about, is about empowerment and working towards a future where people can look after themselves.
Beautiful. We'll drop some links if we can into the body of, like, into the comments thread here under the broadcast. So we can get, if people want to connect with some of the groups that help, and also the education fund. We've got your page linked above.
Now, we haven't got. I'll share a link to your Nikala Sim page as well. We'll do all that in the comments below, so people can find a way to connect with you to help with the education fund, or connect to find out more information of other ways you can help as well. At the very least,
anything really. I mean, sorry to talk over you, Theonie. I'm just doing a bit there. So really, I think, there was something I saw on one of your pages about, like, what's his superpower? And I think my superpower is actually networking. So, I'm always willing to find something, anything. So, any questions, if you send me a message on Messenger, then I will do my best to assist.
Okay, beautiful.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Don't go anywhere. I do need to drop you out, but don't go anywhere. We'll be with you in a moment. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, ladies. Thanks, everybody, for coming along.
Thanks, Nikala. Wow. So inspirational. Oh, my God. How can we help?
I know, and we really do take the simple things for granted. So if you are in a position to help financially, get in contact with Nikala. If you're not in a position to help financially, there is something Nikala said that I do want to say, if it doesn't matter if you've got, $1 to donate, because if 1,000 people donate $1, there's $1,000. So it doesn't matter how big or small. If it's something that you want to support, find a way to do it. And if there are other ways that you want to support the other organisations that Nikala was talking about, was it the Mums for Refugees?
Mums for Refugees, and there's others. We'll get the links and we'll pop them in the comments.
And connect with another way that you can help.
And at the very, very least, if the only thing that you can do at this point is to make sure that other people get this information through this broadcast, then do what you know that you can do right here on Facebook. Until
next week, we have run out of time. I could spend hours speaking to Nikala. We have run out of time. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're watching live or catching the replay, make sure that your friends need to see this and you know it. We'll speak to you same time, same place next week.
Bye.